The attack on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment.
Hey there, guys. Welcome to the channel. So, guys, it's starting to look more and more like Special Counsel Jack Smith probably destroyed his own case in his rush to get the Supreme Court involved. And I think, personally, if you're asking me, I think he dramatically overestimated his own position, which is exactly what happens when these people, they live and they operate in a bubble. And I'll explain everything I mean in a minute, guys. But first, if you haven't already, help our channel continue to grow, right? I think going into 2024, it is going to be more and more difficult to get conservative voices heard. And guys, we're going to have to do this thing together. If you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. You guys are very, very important to this and can't do it without you. So here's what's going on. Special Counsel Jack Smith, you guys are already aware, he rushed to the Supreme Court to try and get the highest court we have, the highest court in the land, to make a rushed decision on whether or not presidential immunity would apply to Donald Trump's January 6th case. And the reason he wanted to rush it is because he believes that the appellate court will side with Judge Chutkan, who already ruled that President Trump does not have presidential immunity, at least in this case. But he also knows that that court takes a very, very long time. They've taken over a year just to decide whether Donald Trump was immune from civil litigation. So he's worried that, one, the appeals is going to take a very long time, right? And B, he knows that if the appeals court upholds the judge's ruling, that's when Donald Trump will be able to take it all the way to the Supreme Court and delay, basically, which is totally fine. I mean, that's the way the system works. That's the way the system should work for everybody and anybody, for every single one of us. Democrats, they always want to talk about how everyone's equal under the law. It's such a lie that they believe that. But this is what equal under the law looks like. Each court, each step, each piece of the judicial machine just working as intended and when intended. But here's why he wants to rush it. All he cares about is tying Donald Trump up in court before and during the election. Everybody knows this. Most people don't even fault him for it, for trying to rush. But the problem is when you ask a court to do something special, to treat a certain defendant or even a certain plaintiff differently than statute or precedent requires, well, you have to have a pretty damn good reason. And, you have to have a good reason to ask the court to do something special, ask the court to bend the rules, And people will tell you this has been done. This has been done. Everyone knows this has been done. Everyone who's paying attention, but it is very, very rare. And when it has been done, the government has offered a correct argument, at least as far as the courts are concerned. So we all know Jack Smith did not come up with any reasonable explanation. He said his explanation basically was this is a special case, but the only thing that makes it special, or so he says, is the person who the defendant is, which really, if the courts were looking at this constitutionally, which they are, that's actually the exact reason why you play it by the book and you don't make special exceptions or exemptions. Anyway, the court told him to pound sand. And, maybe, we'll see. Depending on what the lower court finds, maybe they'll end up in the Supreme Court. But the result for Smith is that all of this extra noise is probably going to give Donald Trump exactly what he wants, which is delay, probably beyond the 2024 presidential election. And I can hear the left screaming about it now. He wants to delay. Of course, he wants to delay because only a guilty man would delay. And I don't think that's what's going on at all. I think any presidential candidate who wants to actually participate in the election, who wants to be able to actually campaign, who wants to be able to debate Joe Biden when the time comes, if the Democrats will even allow him to debate anybody, would want to be available for the election, to campaign, would not want to be tied up in lawfare. If he's tied up in lawfare, stuck in a court, he can't have dedicated participation in anything. If you're tied up sitting in a court, all that is exactly what they're doing, is never-ending lawfare, coming from every single direction. Anyway, I'm rambling, but I have a pretty interesting clip here. A guy named John Dean, who was actually counsel to President Nixon when he got railroaded, and that's exactly what happened there. A whole different video. But he was actually one of Nixon's worst turncoats. But anyway, so this guy, regardless of all that, he's one of the original rhinos. He's no fan of Donald Trump. All that said, he's still a fairly impressive legal mind. And I think what he has to say about Jack Smith and his filings is pretty important to hear.
It really doesn't help him.
John, the special counsel pointed to a Watergate-era case in his brief, which I know you know well. In that case, the Supreme Court leapfrogged the appeals court to quickly hear a case in which, as you'll remember, the judges ultimately rejected then President Richard Nixon's claims of presidential privilege, this in a subpoena fight over Oval Office tapes. Do you think the Supreme Court was wrong to reject Smith's connection to that case and Smith's argument in that sense?
Smith didn't make a real strong argument to me when I read the brief. The Nixon case, I would have put on a scale of 1 to 10 at a 4. I would have put this on a 9 or 10. And they didn't really build that case. So the Supreme Court felt no urgency in the briefing. I think as a practical matter, they want to have all their options. This is very highly charged political stuff. And they may want to be able to not be the first to leap in to go after this president, but rather sit back and look at what the Court of Appeals does, which is going to reject his immunity.
Right. Of course, as Gloria noted, Trump's tactic here and in many legal cases is to delay. What happens once the appeals court decides? And does Trump have a long runway there to keep delay, for instance, to delay his appeal then to the Supreme Court?
Potentially, if this were kind of the normal course of litigation, then you've got like a certain period of time where he can say he wants to actually have the entire D.C. Court of Appeals look at it. And then after that period of time, 90 days, in which he could then decide whether or not he wants to go to the Supreme Court. But I don't think that's going to happen. There are ways in which the Court of Appeals can control it. For example, they could say, as what just happened in Colorado, we're going to lift the stay on the district court and allow the district court to proceed if you do not petition the Supreme Court within X amount of time. So they can easily force him to go to the court quickly, or Jack Smith could do what he's already suggested that he wants, that after the D.C. Court of Appeals rules, then the Supreme Court can expedite. And that's the option that's also very much available to the courts. It's really in the court's hands what they want to do, the Supreme Court.
Yeah, you put something of an expiration date on that appeal process. John, do you see, though, a scenario where Trump could, if the chips fall, all the chips fall in his direction, could delay this beyond the election?
Yeah, so you guys see that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, man. John Dean, obviously, he didn't pull any punches. He even said he does think that the question of Trump immunity is twice as important as whether or not Nixon had immunity, which to me, he's implying that he believes it's very, very important that Donald Trump does not have immunity. But even with all that, he recognizes that Jack Smith just completely laid an egg. It's almost like he didn't even try to make a sound argument, and it feels to me like he just assumed that everyone else is just like him and his team, and everyone else is just in the same perpetual get Trump mode. And here's the thing, man. Even when people are in that mode, most of them at least try to justify the actions that they make. They at least try to bend reality to make it look good. Nothing like that here from Jack Smith. Basically we have to move fast because it's Trump. I need your help because it's Trump. It's everything's because it's Trump. Jack Smith, I really do think that he has this fantasy that he's the only person who can save the world from the evil authoritarian Donald J. Trump. But anyway, pretty interesting stuff. I actually didn't know that once a court makes a decision, an appeals court, you can actually have the broader bench review it again. That's interesting. So we'll see how it goes. Not sure how any courts will rule, but it's looking like, their lawfare tactic is going to fail. This is all that this has been about from the beginning, if you ask me. There's obviously a portion of all these people that really do want to see the man in prison. They want to see the man die in prison. But, for the people that are really pulling the strings, this isn't about that. This is all about tying him up and taking him off the board by any means necessary. But anyway, that's all I've got, guys. If you haven't already, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. We'll see you in the next one.